do a little housekeeping here. Hi everybody, I'm Susan. I'm a grateful recovered alcoholic. I'm going to talk to you today about my history, my story. I'm going to do it in 3 parts: what it was like, what happened, and what it's like now. You will hear throughout this talk that I've given that I have dabbled in other things. I don't think there's much out there that I haven't tried, but I call myself an alcoholic, a grateful recovering alcoholic, because that's what I always go back to. That's my go-to. If nothing else is available, I'm going to find something to drink if I'm not spiritually centered. So that's why I call myself a grateful recovering alcoholic. I want to start out, though, at the very beginning, a long time ago, because I'm almost 66 years old now. But I was born and I was raised in a loving household. I was an only child. I was given everything I needed, everything I wanted. I was doted on. My parents truly, truly loved me. But I think I was born weird. Just weird. Have you ever thought that maybe you're a square peg and you're just trying to get into a round hole? That was me all my life, all the way back to the very beginning. They got pictures of me at my birthday parties, and I'm sitting there going, because I never felt like I fit in. I always got the feeling that all y'all got the instruction manual on how to do life, and I didn't get it. And I was upset. And I went through my life and everything, my parents drank, and it turns out my dad was an alcoholic, but I didn't know it. Because, he didn't do stupid stuff. He didn't get drunk and break stuff. He didn't fall down. But drinking was the primary crux of our family. There were before dinner drinks. There was wine with dinner. There were after dinner drinks. There were before bed drinks. If you got up in the middle of the night, you got a shot of whiskey. That was just how it was. And I thought that was normal. I didn't think there was anything weird about it. I went to people's houses for sleepovers and there wasn't alcohol in the house. I was like, what's up with you guys? What do you guys do? You talk? What? You sit around and talk? That's just weird. But anyway, I guess it was probably I drank, I sipped my parents' stuff, and every now and then my dad would, let me sneak a beer or whatever. But I was raised in this rural town in the eastern shore of Maryland, so I'm a Yankee. I'm not even from Texas. But it was very much like San Angelo. It had high schools, and we did sports, and everything was like, and everybody knew everybody's business. I don't know if you've ever lived in a town where you couldn't get away with anything because somebody was going to tell your mom and dad. Well, that was my hometown, and my mom was a school teacher, which made it twice as bad. And my dad at the time worked as an office manager in a big company on the other side of town, so I couldn't get away with anything. But when I was about 14 years old, I got invited to a party after a football game. And it was out in the woods. And there was a keg. And somebody handed me a glass of beer. And I felt it go in my mouth, down to my gut, and then come right back up in the back of my neck. And all those little hairs started to stand up, and it felt right. And suddenly I was okay. And alcohol was my solution from that point on. If I felt off, I'd take a shot. And it worked. And I didn't go crazy. I wasn't an alcoholic from birth. But that was what I did. And then there were other things, in high school you do other things and people pass you stuff and you smoke it or drink it, whatever. So there was other stuff going on, but throughout high school, the alcohol was it. Weekends, parties, we had a big basement, people would come over. Like I said, there was alcohol in my house, so suddenly my parents' alcohol started disappearing. They never questioned me, which was kind of weird because I was the only other person in the house. Yeah, but, they were nice, I guess. But it was really kind of weird. Do you have a big book? Do y'all have big books? Do you want a big book? You can get a big book if you want a big book. Anyway, I want to read something to you, and I want to ask you if you felt this way. Because this is how I felt when I wasn't drinking in high school. I was having trouble with personal relationships. I couldn't control my emotional nature. I was a prey to misery and depression. I couldn't make a living. Of course, I was in high school. I had the feeling of uselessness. I was full of fear. I was unhappy, and I couldn't seem to be of real help to other people. Those bedevilments that are listed on page 52, that was me long before I became an alcoholic. That was my life. I couldn't figure stuff out. High school came and I graduated, and it was a blur because I don't remember because we did some other stuff before, but walked across the stage and everybody else was excited because they were going to go off to college or they were going to get married or they were already pregnant or whatever. And they were like, what are you going to do? And I was like, I don't know. I just don't have a clue. I don't know what I'm going to do. And the fall came and everybody went off to college or everybody was with their husbands or wives and yeah, I don't know. I was walking the streets one day and I passed this office and it was the military recruitment office. And the Navy recruiter was in the window doing his Navy recruiter stuff and he looked good. So I was like, I might be interested in joining the Navy. I don't know. I knew. I kept walking by. I was just like, nah, that can't be true. A few days later, I went by again, and the Navy recruiter wasn't there. But the Air Force recruiter was standing at the doorway, and he was like, yo, come on in, let's talk. And I went in and I talked to him, and he showed me these videos of this blue airplane, and it was going up, off, straight up, boom, sonic booms. People were saluting, everything looked sharp. I said, that's what I want to do. That's what I want to do. And he signed me up on the spot. Unfortunately, I had to get my parents' permission because I wasn't old enough to think for myself. And my dad signed immediately, and my mom cried, no, my baby. But my dad says, hey, you realize wherever she goes, we can go visit. But that sold my mom, so she signed too. And I joined the Air Force, and on January something, 1977, I got on a plane and headed to San Antonio, and I went to basic training. And it wasn't that bad. I mean, it wasn't a cakewalk, but women were treated differently than men back then. And our drill instructors weren't as mean as the guys' drill instructors were. So it was nice. I mean, it was 6 weeks. They taught us how to make our beds. They gave us all this military stuff and some pretty cool uniforms. And I graduated and went to my very first assignment. I was tech school in Denver, Colorado. Okay, now you got to realize Maryland is about as flat as San Angelo. But it's the whole state is underwater. And so I go to Colorado, and they got these things called mountains. And I'm like, this is cool. I could do this. I like this. And they had something in the dorms. They checked me into the dorms. Ladies and gentlemen, they had beer machines. Like Coke machines. You put in 75 cents, and it spit out a beer. Man, I saved up my quarters, I tell you. And I drank a lot because it was on. I didn't have any adult supervision at that point. As long as I got up and I was in class on time and I marched okay and I didn't fall out and I didn't get into trouble, it was good. So I figured out how to drink functionally and do what I had to do. And it was so much fun. I loved it. I learned all about how to fix these electronics. Don't ask me how they stuck me in electronics, but I learned how to fix radios and communication and navigation stuff. On this plane, it was called an F-15. And at the time, it was the best plane in the Air Force inventory. I don't care what anybody says, it probably still is. But that's just me personally speaking. Anyway, I was one of the first 5 women allowed in the career field. And when I got to my first duty assignment, I was the first woman in the career field. And all these guys, in my shop, the first couple weeks, we went out drinking, and I think they thought, hey, this is going to be pretty easy, I drank most of them under the table. But I still wasn't an alcoholic because I didn't get into any trouble, right? My very first duty assignment, Germany. Where do you send somebody who likes to drink? Where they invented beer, wine, and schnapps. If you've never tried schnapps, you missed your opportunity because you can't do it now. But it was good. It was fun, and my first assignment was only 17 months long, and I don't remember any of it, hardly, because I was drunk the whole time. But I never got into trouble, so I wasn't an alcoholic. I didn't even know what alcoholism was at the time. My second duty assignment was Okinawa, and the only reason I got there was they were looking for people to go with the new airplane to this new assignment. And they asked for volunteers, and my first question was, does the sun shine there? Because if you've ever been to Germany, the sun doesn't shine much in Germany. That's how the wine is so good. But they said, yeah, the sun shines and there's beaches. I was like, whoop, I'm in. Send me. So I went to Okinawa. I was there for a little while and drank a lot, did my job, and then I met this guy. Yeah. Hey. And it was fun. We were drinking buddies, and it was great fun, and we had a good time. And he played softball, and I got drunk, and he came over, and he got drunk after softball, and that's just kind of how it went. But we were getting close to having to go on our next assignment, and the military has these rules. They will not guarantee you assignment together unless at the time you were married. So we decided to get married. That's logical, right? No real, premarital counseling, none of that stuff. We just thought, hey, let's get married. And we did. And we got married, and all of a sudden my best friend, we started fighting. Mostly because we were drunk. Went to our first duty assignment, my first assignment after that, and went back to Denver as an instructor. And we were there for a little while. And how do you solve your marital problems? What? You have a baby. I decided it would be cool to solve our marital problems, so we would have a baby. And he was okay with it, I think. You were okay with it, weren't you? Okay. Oh, yeah. Okay, good. Glad to hear that. Anyway, I got pregnant and I quit drinking. And then I had Paul, our oldest, and suddenly I was a mom. So I had to be the responsible adult, which didn't set well with our whole marital situation. But I would stay home with Paul, and he would go and do what he did. And that's his story, and that's okay. But that's how we lived and survived. And then we got another assignment. And I don't know why, but we ended up getting an assignment to Alamogordo, New Mexico. Now, I don't know if you've ever been there. You leave in Denver and you're going to... I mean, you're leaving one of the most beautiful parts of the country, and you drive south, and you go over the Raton Pass, and suddenly you're in this desert. And there is nothing there. And it wasn't fun. Had another child there because if the first one doesn't fix the marital problems, the second one definitely will. You're with me, right? Yeah, this is how I could live my life though, okay? There was nothing controlling my life but me and him. We had control and we were doing things the way we thought was the right way to go. Drinking was all of it, you know? Well, as soon as we got to Holloman Air Force Base, the very first stop we went to was the headquarters office where we could put in the sheet that says, we will go anywhere to get out of this assignment. And they sent us back to Germany. Oh, I'm like, I'm in the zone, you know? It's cool. Unfortunately, things got really, really, really bad. It wasn't a good situation. That's all I'll say about it. He got sober. I did not. That's how selfish I was. And how selfish I can still be if I'm not spiritually centered. He got sober. He worked a program. He went to Alcoholics Anonymous. He got a sponsor. He did the steps. He was rocking it. And I was drunk. I still drank. He got sober. That was in 1986. And I drank continuously. But here's the deal, okay? I told you that alcohol was my solution. That's what solved it for me. Until it didn't work anymore. And there's a saying that says, woman takes a drink, the drink takes the drink, and then the drink takes the woman. That's exactly what happened to me. We went through some rocky periods. It was rough. My solution was drinking. And then in 30 days, both of my sons left home. My oldest got married, my youngest went into the Marine Corps, and I lost total identity because my life was wrapped up in those boys. That was 100% of my life, and suddenly, boom, they're gone. And I was sitting in the living room going, what in the name of sense am I going to do? And I dove into a bottle. Now, at that point, it wasn't an alcohol bottle. It was a pill bottle. But the same situation. I figured out how to doctor shop. I figured out how to get all the pills from all the different doctors, and I was going through some pills. But it was bad. My husband discovered my pills, my pill bottles anyway, and I don't know why I saved them, but I did. And he found them, and one day I came home and they were kind of stacked up on the counter. And he says, I think you got a problem. And I immediately started crying, and I said, I can't stop. I can't stop. And he immediately drove me to rehab. And I was in rehab for a while. And I came out, and I was okay. It was good. I didn't want any more pills. And time passed. It was okay. And I had been introduced to AA. Somebody gave me a book. I'm going to tell you right now, you can't get the program through osmosis. You can't just own the book and say, I'm sober. Because it didn't work. I had the book. I went to the meetings. I listened to y'all talk. And I nodded my head. And I said, hi, I'm an alcoholic, because I wanted to fit in. I guess. I don't know if I really believed I was an alcoholic at that point. But then that thing said, remember I told you I identify as an alcoholic because that's what I go back to? That's what I went back to. I went back to alcohol. But it consumed me. It was all of my life. I lost jobs because I could not go home at lunch and get drunk and come back. I mean, I quit jobs. I lost jobs. Anyway. I can't remember. Yeah. I went to rehab again. This one I had to pay for out of pocket, and ladies, it was an expensive rehab. Not naming names, but it was an expensive rehab. And I stayed there for 30 days, and I loved it because it was in the hill country. It was beautiful. And I mean, we went up to the top of the hill in the morning, and we prayed, and yada, yada, yada. And I was there for 30 days. 28 days, I started thinking about how I was going to drink again. So something didn't take, right? Right. It was at that point that I discovered that there are other things that contain alcohol that you don't have to buy at grocery stores or at package stores, at Pinkies, at whatever. And I started drinking that. And it was kind of expensive, so I figured out I could shoplift it because it fit in my pocket, and I needed it, and they didn't care. So that was my logic. Anyway, it consumed me. I was going through 3 to 4, sometimes about 4 big bottles of this stuff that you can buy in grocery stores or steal. And then at this point I knew I had a problem, right? Because normal people don't drink the stuff I'm drinking. But I couldn't stop drinking it. My husband, again, helped me to see that I had a problem. And I went to another rehab, different location. This one, wasn't in the beautiful hill country, but I got the point across, and I realized I started understanding and listening to these steps they were talking about. The first step, and admitting I'm powerless, and understanding that there's something out there that has power. And anyway, it started to ring a bell. So I came back from that rehab, and they told me to go to sober living. I had to go to Kerrville, and I went to a women's sober living house, and I went through 3 of them. In 3 months I got kicked out because I could not stay sober. That's all there is to it. So I just came home, and I was like, I can't not drink. And he was so disgusted with me. It was awful. I mean, we did not have a marriage anymore because I was married to a bottle. And he didn't know what to do. And at that point, I don't think he really cared too much, except for he loved me. Finally, this again, how selfish I was. He was going to Florida for a memorial service. His mother had passed away. And I could not stay sober. And he wasn't going to go because I couldn't stay sober. To actually stay straight at this point, it wasn't alcohol, it was another substance. And I told him, I said, okay, listen, I'll go to rehab and you go take care of your mom. And he dropped me off at that rehab, and he says, I don't think this is going to work. If you can't I can't do this anymore. I want a divorce. And he dropped me at the front door, and he drove off, and he went to Florida. Well, I was in doing the detox thing, and then about 4 days into it, I started calling him, and he wouldn't answer the phone. He wouldn't return my calls. Wow. That was scary, And it was at that point I got down on my knees, and I said, God, I can't do this anymore. And luckily I brought my big book with me, and I started reading it. And I heard his response. Okay, we can work with that. And that was it. That was my first step experience. I got on my knees. I said, lady, I can't do this. God, I can't do this anymore. And I meant it from the bottom of my heart. And he said, okay. And there was this peace and this calm that I had never felt since. And I do now, but I hadn't felt prior to that. And I realized this is what I want. This is what I'm missing. This is what I need to be. This is how it needs to be. And he finally answered the phone a few days later, and then he came for a couple visitations, and we had some serious talks about life and stuff and feelings and stuff, if you know what I mean. And then I started really working the program. Now, like Mindy said, at the time, at the end, she was my sponsor, and she had given up on me because I relapsed so many times. At one point, she said, I just can't help you anymore. There's nothing else I can do. So I was like totally alone. But when I got on my knees at that rehab, I wasn't alone anymore. God was with me. And it was at that point I did the rest of the steps. I acknowledged that there was something more powerful than me out there. And I made that decision to turn. Okay, here's the deal, ladies. You don't just turn over your drinking. You don't just turn over your drug use. You don't just turn over the yucky stuff. You turn over everything. Your will and your life, everything, to God. And it's not a little God. It's big G God. And then I sat down with my sponsor and I did a real fourth step. I found out what I was resenting because I had never even thought of it before. Why was I always so mad? Why was I always so alone? Why was I always so lost? Because there were people in my life that had hurt me. I had been sexually assaulted. I had been abused. I had been mistreated. And I held resentments. And then the next one says, what are you afraid of? Oh. Yeah, really, what am I afraid of? I'm afraid you won't like me. If you find out who I really am, you won't like me anymore. That was my biggest fear. That was why I always wore a mask. And then the other harms. Who did I hurt? Who did I mistreat? Who did I abuse? Who was I mean to? And I listed all those people. And I talked with my sponsor about these things, honestly. And she told me, yeah, okay, I've done that too. That's no big deal. And I felt okay. I felt like I was part of. I wasn't just the scum of the earth. I wasn't nasty. But I also wasn't higher than everybody else. I was right-sized. I was just like everybody else. 7 and 8 said I had to be willing to let God take my character defects. I thought I was going to fix them. Don't we all? We think we're going to fix our problems? Okay, this sick mind cannot solve this sick mind. So I had to be willing to give all of that junk, that yucky stuff, to God and let Him decide which character defect He was going to take away first. Because I thought it was going to be, I don't know what. This is so cool. Anyway, I thought, He was going to take away character defect X, and He ended up taking away character defect B. And I was like, all of a sudden, because one of my character defects was I had a foul mouth. I could cuss like a sailor because I'd been in the Air Force for so long. And He took it away. I mean, honest to gosh, one day I woke up and I was like, oh, I can't say those words anymore. They just, they hurt, come out. But He took those character defects away. And then the hard part, I had that list of people, remember, that I had harmed? Those people that I harmed? Yeah. I had that list, and I had to go to each one of those people and make amends. Now, I didn't just say I'm sorry. Saying I'm sorry, I said I'm sorry a lot of times. I mean, I don't think you can count anymore how many I'm sorries I said. But I had to go to people and I had to say, I know I did this to you. How can I make it right? And then I had to sit there and I had to listen to whatever it is they said. Yeah, like it or not, exactly. I mean, with him, he loved me. And he understood the program. So, he forgave me. But there was still a trust issue. We'll get with that in a little bit. But the thing is that I had to go to people that still had issues with what I had done to them. And I had to sit in their offices and I had to listen to them explain to me how I had hurt them. And that tore me up. But from that tearing, there was growth. And then we do steps 10. I do steps 10, 11, and 12 every day now. Because I'm always taking inventory. I'm always thinking about, did I say that right? Should I go back and apologize? Do you think I might have hurt somebody's feelings? And then we do 11th step every night. We review how our day was. I share how my day was with some ladies. They share how their day was with me. But the 12th step, that's where the joy is. Because that's where I get to live out God's purpose for me. I get to help people. I get to be a sponsor. I get to help walk other ladies through this program. But more than that, I get to do what God says He needs me to do. And that's what I do today. Yeah, I'm a little bit busy normally. Not only do I help people and I sponsor people, but I also help to run a food pantry here in town, which might look like an easy job, but it's really not. And my husband and I do some counseling on the side. But I want to point something out to you, that if you have your big book, and even if you don't, God is an amazing God. He doesn't leave us here alone. He doesn't tell us, you got to do this just because I said so. He gives us promises, and His promises are all through the Bible. And I'm not getting into that right now, but they're there. But the thing is the men who wrote the first 164 pages of Alcoholics Anonymous, this book that we live by, they put promises in there too. So every step has a promise. The first step, promise, can be found on page XXIX, for people that can speak Roman numeral, which is a challenge, but it's there. It says, on the other hand, and strange as it may seem to those who do not understand, once a psychic change has occurred, this is the first step promise, the very same person who seemed doomed, who had so many problems he despaired of ever solving them, suddenly finds himself easily able to control his desire for alcohol. The only effort necessary being that he follow a few simple rules. That's the 12 steps. But that's the first step promise. The second step promise is found on page 57. I'll go through the whole book. And the second step is acknowledging the fact that there is a God out there, right? Something more powerful than us. 57 says, even so has God restored us all to our right minds. To this man, the revelation was sudden. He's talking about the white light experience. Some of us go into it more slowly. That would be me. But he comes to all who honestly sought him. If you're having trouble getting in touch with God, Get on your knees and be honest. Don't just know it, feel it. Make it a heart change, not just a head change. The third step promise on page 63. Says, when we sincerely took such a position, again, making the decision, all sorts of remarkable things followed. We had a new employer. Being all powerful, he provided what we needed if we kept close to him and performed his work well. Established on such footing, we became less and less interested in ourselves, our little plans and designs. More and more, we became interested in seeing what we could contribute to life. As we felt new power flow in, as we enjoyed peace of mind, as we discovered we could face life successfully, as we became conscious of his presence, we began to lose our fear of today, tomorrow, and the hereafter. We were reborn. And then it goes on. There's a fourth-step promise on page 70. It's a little bit shorter. After we make that list, and we're honest, we haven't talked to anybody about it yet, but we've made the list. We have begun to learn the tolerance, patience, and goodwill towards all men, even our enemies, for we look on them as sick people. So this is where we realize that those people that hurt us, they were sick. And that's when we can learn to forgive. 6 and 7, the 7-step prayer is the promise. If you memorize that, you know the promise. Step 8 and 9 on page 83. And you know the 9-step promises, those are the long ones. Everybody recites those at the beginning and there at the end of the meeting. I'm not going to read the whole thing. But the promise for step 10 is on page 84. 11 is on page 88. And the 12th step promise is on page 89. There will be a test. I'm just kidding. Bottom line, ladies, women, and gentlemen, what I need for you to understand is how this book transformed my life. It was amazing because it was this book that opened up my mind to the understanding that there was a God. And from there, I got involved in other things, in church, in Bible studies, in ladies' groups in church, and I became functional again. Today, that's what my husband and I do, is we do those things that God calls us to do. We're leaving soon, like very soon, 6 weeks. And yeah, we're going to see family. We're going to be closer to our kids. But we're going because God called us to do a new ministry there. And when God calls, you kind of got to go. And we're going to miss all y'all because this little group started 10 years ago, 11 almost, 11 years ago in our living room. And there were 8 people-ish, maybe. And it's grown to this. And y'all are my people. Y'all are the ones that I go to when it's falling off. Because problems still happen. Just because I'm sober doesn't mean I walk around like I got rainbows and unicorns. I mean, life happens. Bad stuff happens. Awful, terrible stuff happens. But I got a program and I got a God that never leaves me. He's always there. And He's put people in my path who can help me when I get a little bit off to come back to center truth. There's a story, and this will be my last story, but there's a story about a ship captain. He's guiding his ship, and he gets distracted. And the ship veers just 5 degrees in the middle of the Atlantic. And he thinks he's heading for New York City. That's not where he ends up. Because that 5 little degree shift caused the boat to go in a totally different direction. And the same thing is true with our lives. If we don't stay spiritually true, if we don't keep our eyes on God, we will drift. But our job as a group is to notice when our fellow members are starting to drift and to call them back. Not call them out, but to call them back to what is center, what is true. And I'm going to miss y'all, but I still got 6 weeks to pester you. And to ask you to come and help me at the food pantry. No, I'm sorry. That was my plug. I'm sorry. It was my shameless plug. But thank you so much for letting me speak today. It has been a true honor. I love each and every one of you. And you're going to go with me when I leave. You'll be in my heart. Thank you.